Just speaking for Bountiful, I was down here for the sparring clinic a couple weeks ago, and I met some of the instructors or the coaches, and it seems like the environment is the same everywhere. I went to a couple of classes down in St. George a couple of months ago, and same environment, same positivity, and you guys make us feel really good, even when we're doing bad. Especially when I showed up and my stance was wrong, still is sometimes. The punches were different. Everything was just so different. You guys just stuck with me, and it was great. You know, it's been a phenomenal experience. I just love it.
Hey guys, and welcome back to another episode of the Legends Boxing Podcast. We have a guest in studio with us, and this has turned into who I consider a very good friend. His name's Brandon Crane. He works for Homeland Security, but he is a member at my Bountiful location up in Bountiful, Utah, which is kind of northern Utah. It's about 15 minutes north of Salt Lake City. Yeah. If you guys are familiar, those who are not from Utah, welcome, Brandon.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here. Thanks for inviting me. Appreciate it.
I'm happy to have you here. I really am curious. Like, number one, like, I support law enforcement like there's nobody's business. My father retired 34 years law enforcement, and he started in the San Leandro Sheriff's Department. And then he moved to LA and did the LA Academy back in the 70s and worked in Watts and in Hollywood and all this other stuff, and some super cool stories. So yeah, I support law enforcement 100% and back the blue. So thank you for being here. I know you're a very busy guy, and I'm curious kind of that side of it, right? Like, he was beat cop and motorcycle cop and detective and kind of did everything for local law enforcement. But with Homeland, that's a much broader, bigger picture, right? Mm-hmm. So kind of talk us into that a little bit about kind of what your day-to-day is.
Yeah, so I, just so you guys are, I guess, give you some background on me. So I've been in law enforcement for almost 21 years. It'll be 21 years in September. Wow. Started my career in 2002 as a special agent with the U.S. Secret Service, which I was able to get kind of shortly after college.
You mean like the guys who protect the president?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
That's right.
Wow.
Yeah, I was very fortunate to kind of get into that career as early as I did. I graduated from college in 2000 and was hired as a special agent with the Secret Service in 2002. A lot of that had to do, I think, with 9/11, and they were trying to ramp up federal law enforcement, the security and intelligence services, and things like that. And so I think I hit it at a really good time. It was a dream of mine ever since I was a little kid to get into law enforcement. Ironically, I wanted to be LAPD growing up. I grew up in Los Angeles, and from the time I was a little kid, I wanted to be a street cop first, and then go in and be an FBI agent or something like that. And so I graduated from college and started applying to every agency you can think of, both in California and here. My folks had moved up here, I think my senior year of college. So I was up here applying like crazy, and ended up getting picked up by the Secret Service first. Did that in Los Angeles for 7 years. Had an incredible experience down there. I got to travel the world, protected, all the presidents you can think of. Yeah.
So like when they came to LA, like you were on duty to go protect them, right?
Correct. Okay. But also traveled with them quite a bit. I wasn't on a full-time detail. Like I said, I was with the service for about 7 years. And at about 8 years, you go to DC and go on a full-time detail. So we would supplement any of the protectees that the Secret Service covers. And most people think of just the president or the vice president and their families, but believe it or not, they cover any foreign dignitaries that come in the U.S., past presidents, anybody that is deemed protectable by either Congress or the president. So there was all sorts of random people that we protected, former ambassadors, things like that, if there were threats against them. And so we would get tasked out from LA to travel. At the time, most of the time I spent was with George Bush and his family. So I went to Moscow with him. I went to Vietnam. I went to Africa a couple of times. It was really cool.
That's really cool.
And mixed in all of that, we got to work criminal investigations too. The Secret Service is tasked to do financial crimes. So we did a lot of counterfeiting of U.S. currency, fraud, identity theft, cyber crimes. And it was fun. It was running, gunning during the week, and then occasionally you get called off to put on the sunglasses and earpiece and pretend to look cool in your suit with the president, right?
So
it was a really, really cool job. Again, did that for about 7 years. And then the operational tempo, meaning the travel, was tough. You can't plan anything. Your holidays, weekends, birthdays, those are all gone because you're at the needs of the service. And to be honest with you, my wife kind of got tired of it, and she was ready for me to
So you
move
were
on.
married at the time?
I was.
Even like that young? When did you get married, in college or?
No, I got married about, I want to say about a year and a half after college, right about the time I got hired by the Secret Service.
Oh, so she married into that type
She
of
married
lifestyle.
into the lifestyle,
wow.
and I made a promise with her to like say, look, if this gets to be too much, I'll start looking around. And ultimately, it got to be too much for everybody. I was just missing everything. Was going. I loved it. It was an incredible experience. I mean, it's a great single man's job. But once you start getting wife and kids, which I was starting to do a couple of years in, it was time to look elsewhere. And I got really lucky. I was assigned as a Secret Service Task Force officer for Homeland Security. The agency I work for is called Homeland Security Investigations, or HSI. We're the primary investigative arm of Homeland Security. We have a ton of investigative authority, which we can talk about a little bit later. But I ended up as a task force officer in the Port of LA, doing some really cool stuff down there. We were boarding ships and catching smugglers and laying off on Catalina Island, catching human smugglers and human traffickers and stuff.
Wow.
It was really pretty cool, yeah. And I went, wow, this is awesome. And I get to go home every night. I don't have to travel. So we ended up putting in for Homeland Security and ended up getting picked up. And my wife's from Salt Lake City, so we decided, you know what, I'm going to see if I can transfer up to Salt Lake City. And so I was able to do that, and been in Salt Lake City off and on for about 13 years as a special agent. And then I got promoted a couple of years ago. We went to DC for a couple of years, and then I got promoted again. And so now I run all of the Homeland Security operations for the state of Utah. So
Badass. See, I knew he was like a Jason Statham, guys. He's
well, I don't know if I'm as I can't kick people as well as he can.
Well, wait a minute. We haven't gotten into that because there's background before you and I met.
Okay, yeah.
And,
There's a little
some
bit of background.
So, like, again, like when I first met him, I'm like rugged, dashing good look, rugged good looks.
And you're not
it's
wrong.
More of a,
You're not
no,
wrong,
not at
right?
all.
So
it's just a total Jason Statham aura that's going on here. And like, honestly, like for those who aren't watching, like, please feel free when you got some time, you're not driving, you know, watch it on Spotify, watch it on YouTube. You will be able to reference this, what we're talking about, but also he doesn't look like, how old are you?
I am 48.
48, 2 years away from 50, got a six pack, shredded. I mean, like, come on. And it's not just from law enforcement because trust me,
It's
been
not
around
from law enforcement, believe me. If it was just from law enforcement, I would look vastly different.
Right.
Vastly
Yes.
different.
So okay. So thanks for sharing all that. Now, my question: did you fly in Air Force One? Like that's how you were traveling with the president?
So no, we never actually got to fly on Air Force One. Was around it all the time. Typically, the way that the Secret Service traveled was either by military car plane, which is not as accommodating as that might sound. I've slept underneath the presidential limo several times while traveling overseas. I know that sounds funny, but we fly on what are called C-17s, which are...
Oh, you mean the limos in the
limo? You fly with the
Okay.
vehicles. Yeah, you fly with the vehicles, and especially on these long hops overseas to the Middle East or Europe or wherever he was going, the support agents like myself, you fly with the planes, and so you would just pop some sort of sleep aid, lay out on the ground because they have these little fold-down jump seats, and once you're ready to take a nap, you find a spot, and more than once, the only spot was sticking your legs underneath what they call the Beast, the big armored limo, and sleep for 8 hours. And believe it or not, you can sleep pretty well like that. I've slept under the First Lady's limo too.
That just doesn't seem right to me.
I
The
know.
guy who's going to jump in front of a bullet for the president gets to sleep on a metal ground underneath a car.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Oh yeah. Believe me, they don't give you first class accommodations.
No, it doesn't sound
When
as
you're
much.
traveling, when we travel domestic, we flew commercial.
Okay.
So that was pretty good. But overseas, they stick you on an Air Force cargo plane, and they fly you over there with all the equipment and the vehicles and all that stuff. And it's. I have some pretty funny stories I can share with you offline about bathrooms going down on a 15-hour.
Oh, man.
Yeah, it can get kind of dicey sometimes on those
I imagine.
aircraft.
I
But,
mean, I'm not a really good flyer to begin with. And so Yeah, I'm glad you had the job. That's not a job
You're
I'm
welcome.
cut out
You're
for.
welcome. You're welcome.
That's good. So, okay, so let's talk a little bit about kind of your fight background, kind of how you found Legends. You did Krav before, right?
Yes.
Did you do any other type of fighting styles or stuff? I mean, other than like the combatants that they teach you in the academy, did they go any higher for the Secret Service and for Homeland or any of that? Do you have to do more training?
Yeah. So I just to answer your first question. So I started, I want to say when I was in college, and I took a little bit of Taekwondo. The reason why I did that is because they actually offered it as a class. I went to Brigham Young University, and they offered it as a class down there, and I needed an elective, and I thought, yeah, that'd be cool. So I actually took a couple of classes there and didn't really love it, but I thought, okay, this is a good foundation for what I want to get into. Mm-hmm. And then about 4 years ago or so, about the time we were coming back from DC, I decided, I want to really get into. I guess the way that they term it would be more like self-defense fighting, not as much sport fighting. So I started doing a lot of research, and I had a friend that was taking Krav Maga, which for listeners who don't know, it's an Israeli self-defense fighting system that kind of incorporates anything you can think of, from boxing to wrestling to BJJ to Muay Thai, that kind of stuff, as well as how to break chokes and things like that. I said, oh, this seems like a pretty good, useful tool for the law enforcement, what we call defensive tactics classes that we have to go through about every year or so, refresher courses that are very, very rudimentary stuff. I mean, it's like how to get out of a chokehold, how to handcuff people, things like that. But certainly don't get you to any real level of proficiency if you do have to go hands-on with somebody that actually knows what they're doing, which I've had to a couple of times. And luckily I had friends with me back in the day because as your dad probably told you, that stuff can go south very, very quickly, especially if somebody really knows what they're doing, which occasionally you'll run into somebody like that, right? And so I realized I really felt like I was not where I should be, because I'd been in physical altercations with people on the job before. And again, luckily I had 10 people with me to dogpile the guy, or I may have been in some serious trouble. So I started with Krav Maga, which I still take. I still attend those classes on a weekly basis, which has been great. Learned a lot, but it was interesting as I started learning that particular discipline. I realized I really liked the stand-up striking portion of it. I liked the boxing portion of it, and wanted to learn more of that from a more technical standpoint. Because again, they teach that the gym that I go to is really, really good about this stuff. But again, because Krav Maga is so multidisciplinary, you get a little bit of everything every once in a while. Mm-hmm. And I really liked the boxing portion of it. And so I started looking around like, geez, I wonder if there's some places around here that I could learn some legitimate boxing and get more of a sort of a cardio workout in. And so I started looking around, and I had driven past the Legends boxing gym in Bountiful several times over the years. And I kind of looked in, and I think I checked in one time, just kind of drove by, and it looked like they were doing some sparring, and I'm thinking, oh, that looks pretty cool. But I don't think I was ready to actually go in and learn the boxing portion of things. And so I decided, I'll go ahead and sign up for a class and see if this is exactly is what I'm looking for. Is it just like a hit workout, or am I actually going to be learning real boxing, right? Like, because I didn't know really anything about it. I'd been a boxing fan sort of when Mike Tyson was in his prime, right? Which again dates me a little bit.
That was a long time ago.
I remember doing pay-per-view with friggin', Razor Ruddock and those fights. Yeah. And I mean, buddies would get together and thinking, holy cow, that guy's a maniac, but how cool is that, right? And so came in for my first class and just fell in love with it. I was like, holy cow, this is exactly what I'm looking for, right? To supplement what I'm already doing. I'm actually going to learn real boxing, right? Which is one of your mantras. And I'm getting an incredible cardiovascular workout at the same time. You work on the bags, learn the different techniques, learn the rules, which again, I mean, I knew there were rules, but not like anything that you've taught me over the last year, right? Plus, I get the core workout. I get the legs. My legs are smoked thanks to Emmy. I appreciate that. I could barely get up this morning, so thank you, Emmy, for that yesterday. But that was exactly what I was looking for. And then, learning the real technical sports side of the sport really opened up my eyes. Like, wow, this is awesome. Like I really enjoy this. You know, the sparring has been great because I've learned so many things that I do wrong so quickly, which is exactly what I was looking for, right? And ultimately just fell in love with it, right? And try to get to as many classes as I can. And so there's a great environment up there. You know, you and the other coaches just make it incredibly welcoming. It's not intimidating at all until you get into the ring with Andrew.
Mike.
With Mike, who's 7 inches shorter than me. So not as intimidating as other people that may or may not be on this podcast with me right now. But it's in a good way. Because, I mean, that's where in my opinion, that's where I've learned more than anything on the bags.
It's
in the ring with
implementing, right? Like hitting a heavy bag is great. I mean, and learning the fundamentals of it. But you don't really get to know where you apply those fundamentals until you actually have somebody else trying them back at you. So, you know, and it's not for everybody. Right then and there. Right. Sparring is not for everybody, but hitting a heavy bag, learning the fundamentals, the rules and regulations of boxing, maintaining correct form is for everybody.
It is.
That 100% is. So thank you for saying that. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Let's, how many kids do you have?
So I have 6 kids.
There's a story behind that, isn't there?
There is. Yeah. There's a story behind that. So we even in Utah that shocks people, which is pretty funny. Like so when I to open up a little bit of wouldn't call it dirty laundry, but kind of an interesting story. When I was a senior in high school, I was voted the person that would have the most kids. Dead serious. It's in the yearbook. If anyone wants to verify that, it is in the yearbook. And I grew up in Southern California and grew up in a certain religious culture. And so I became a very easy target for something like that, as you can imagine. I was just
going to ask, because it didn't have anything to do with your background.
Nothing at all. So myself and another young gal at the time who was also part of the same religion, we both got voted that. And I remember thinking to myself, there's no way I'm not going to be that guy. I'm not going to have the most kids. And after we had our 6th kid, about a week later, it all of a sudden, like this light bulb went on. I was like, holy cow, I'm that guy. I am that guy. Because I can tell you, I still am friends with I still talk to my buddies in high school, and they don't have anywhere near 6 kids. So I'm that guy. I'm the self-fulfilling prophecy, I guess. But it's a great thing. I mean, I love it. We wanted to have 4, so we did the right thing and had 6. Part of the story is we adopted our 5th, which is a pretty cool story that I think you and I have talked about before. Really, really neat story, sort of something that we weren't expecting. And then that was it. I was done, and I did the right thing, and went and had a medical procedure done to ensure that. And 18 months later,
didn't insure it.
Boom! It did not insure it, and we ended up having who's now my 5-year-old daughter, and it has just been an incredible thing. Like, I just can't imagine having less than that now, but it does set people aback, especially when we moved to Virginia a couple of years ago. Most of the people I worked with had 1, maybe 2, and I would tell them 6, and I mean, they literally, I thought one guy was gonna have a heart attack. I really did. Like, how can you afford that? And I'm just like, I can't. You know, we're on food stamps, and I've had to rob banks and things like that. But what a great experience to have that. In fact, my oldest daughter, Abby, she just joined as a member for the summer up in Bountiful, and she has absolutely fallen in love with it. And she was talking about it yesterday. We've been working on focus mitts at home and things like that. Good. And so, it's again, I wasn't sure what her reaction to this kind of stuff was going to be, but again, the Legends atmosphere and the environment is so welcoming and so like positive that even someone like her kind of gets down on herself occasionally on stuff like that. Have just embraced it and has fallen in love with it. So it's
also kind of helping father-daughter connection and time, because she's going to be going to college, and there's going to be a lot less time that you guys will have, and so that's kind of recognizing that too with how excited, and she's doing awesome. Like, I've only had her in a couple of my classes, but you can already see how fun she's having, and like the commitment. She's like, I want to spar, but I want to get better first. You're going to teach me how to get better first, and then I'll get in the ring and start sparring. I'm like, that's absolutely great. So how has that been with, 21 years of law enforcement? You said in September, right? Coming up 21?
September, it'll be 21 years.
Yeah, that's crazy. Thank you for your service.
Thank you.
6 kids, married, just right outside of college, or right like just a little after
a couple
college.
years
right?
after college. Yeah.
How is it like? How have you been able to balance all of that? Like, that's a lot to balance. I mean, you got to give a shout out to the wife, right? Like, she's helping.
100%.
Yeah, like,
I mean, she's the real rock star. She's the one that allows me to do a lot of the passions that I want to do. Like, outside of boxing and the Krav Maga stuff, I like to ride my bike. I like to go to the gym, and she allows me to do those things, within reason, right? I mean, it's a give and take.
like a road bike or a motorcycle?
A road bike.
Oh,
A road bike. We've never talked about that.
do you wear spandex? Do you have like the whole suit? And
Depends on
everything?
depends on what you think
Is
about
it
that.
like an
If it's awesome, then yes, I
aerodynamic helmet that helps you go up and down
I mean,
hills?
yeah,
Farmington's
yeah.
pretty hilly, so
It is. I try to stay off the roads as much as I can. The answer is yes. I do wear all the spandex. Do I look great in it? I like to think that I do.
Probably.
But
I mean,
probably not. I mean,
I
every
could
time
imagine it
every
would
time
be
I see
great.
myself in a mirror, I'm like, I got to take these pants off. Just
don't look.
Yeah, exactly. Just whatever you do, don't look down.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've been doing that for an awful long time, and it's sort of therapeutic for me to get out there by myself and ride on the trails. I try not to get on the roads too much. So I don't want to get killed.
That's a good idea.
Yeah,
in
yeah.
this state.
It gets kind of nuts, but my wife is just amazing. Like, she is able to balance all the things going on in our kids' lives, which, as you can imagine, with 6 kids, is just insane. From sports to horseback riding to all of the things that my kids took up archery this summer, and my son's going to be in the debate club this year in school. So it's so much, and she balances all of that plus all the BS that I bring with my job and some of the baggage that I've had over the years with some of the stuff that I did, because a lot of the stuff that I did over the years was related to child exploitation, human trafficking, stuff like that. And, you try not to, but you bring that stuff home, right? I mean, when you see, kids, in terrible situations, right? The worst situations you can be in, it sticks with you. You bring it home. And so she has to help me unpack that too, as well as being a mother to 6 great but kind of crazy kids, and so I give her a ton of credit for not only supporting me and the lifestyle that my job brings, which is irregular hours and travel and all sorts of stuff like that, but always being there. It's like, hey, I'm having a bad day. I need to unload this on somebody, right? I can't do it at work, so I got to do it here. And she's always been there, and she recognizes the signs. If I'm like, especially back in the day when I was really invested in working cases before I got promoted. Because I worked child exploitation cases for about 7 years straight, and she noticed when I was dipping. Like, there was a darkness there for sure because of all the crap that I've had to deal with and all the terrible things that I'd seen. And she was like, "Look, you may want to rethink what you're doing right now." And she was right, because I didn't realize what was happening, but she saw it. I was coming home and sort of disengaging and stuff, and without her, I don't know if I would have had the guts to be like, hey, I got to take a break from this and start doing something else. So I give her a ton of credit for that, for keeping the household together in terms of just our schedules and all the things that we do. And so she's a rock star. I love her to death. So thanks for asking that question.
Yeah, no, that's like, I'm curious. Like, I've been curious because I grew up around him my whole life with my dad, believe it or not, most people, when they get to know me, they don't believe this, but I was raised LDS too, or my parents tried for many years. And to see my dad, like, to balance that, right? To balance every single type of shift that police officers can work. They're not great ones, like, they're not swing shifts and graveyard shifts and, like, this stuff that he would constantly have to do. Plus, in California, where we both grew up on 2 completely different spectrums. Completely different. He was in the nice areas of, California. But, like, I lived, as he well knows and makes constant fun of me for living in Modesto. And growing up in that area, my dad worked for BART PD in Oakland. So he was an hour to an hour and a half commute one way every single day, working just sometimes doubles, and then he was always on the bishopric. So it's like he had 2 jobs, right? Like, all the time. But he always, I'm the youngest of 5 kids. he always had time for me, right? Like he made time, like it was always I never once felt like I didn't have a dad or that he was disconnected or he wasn't there. But like looking back on it now as an adult, it's like, wow, like it makes me admire him even more. And, you know, like on a previous podcast, you know, we had like a guest named Nico had mentioned, like, he's like, yeah, you had mentioned that your dad is your person who you admire, and he totally is. I always have. He's my number one goal to try to achieve that kind of like just like mentality, the kind of stuff that he's definitely gone through his occupation in 34 years. Like, you know, the stories that he would tell us to try to be entertaining are like awesome, but then there's also that, yeah, I'm not going to talk about that. Or there's things that he just will never get out of his memory, but doesn't ever want to talk about and stuff like that. And so he would always just tell people, whatever it is that you can imagine, I've probably seen it or been around it. And like, I just have the utmost respect for people who could do that and then go through that type of day-to-day lifestyle and then still keep a normal lifestyle, right? And keep their family tight and their like watch out for all of that stuff. I mean, that, talk about balance, right? Like, I mean, that's balancing so much stuff. So my hat goes off to you for sure.
Thank you.
Talk to me a little bit about this promotion you were talking about. Now you're no longer doing that. What's kind of like your day-to-day now?
So it's not as exciting as the stuff that I told you about earlier in the conversation. That's for sure. So my title right now is the Assistant Special Agent in Charge for the state of Utah for all of Homeland Security investigations operations, which is a lot of stuff. So my responsibilities, we have 2 offices in Utah. We used to have 4, but we closed down 2 of them. We had one in Provo and one in Ogden, and closed those offices and merged the manpower and resources into Salt Lake City to kind of broaden our footprint a little bit and specialize, because we investigate and prosecute so many different crimes.
From like what to what? Like,
yeah, so that's a good question. So we're sort of an unknown entity within the federal law enforcement world. Most people, of course, have heard of the FBI, they've heard of the DEA. Everybody thinks the CIA sometimes is a law enforcement agency, which it is not. But we're the second largest federal law enforcement agency in the U.S. behind the FBI. We've got about 9,000 special agents worldwide.
wow.
We've got offices, anywhere you can think of. We've got a ton of overseas offices, and constantly expanding in that world. The vast majority of what we do is public safety related. So I would say the biggest thing we do, because we have such a huge presence at the U.S. border, because we are Homeland Security, right? Part of our mission is to secure the border, to secure, basically our pitch is illicit trade, travel, finance, those kinds of things. So anything that crosses the U.S. border is within our jurisdiction. So we have a huge presence in the drug realm.
Okay.
Work a lot of drug trafficking cases from the big, if you know who Chapo Guzman was, the former head of the Sinaloa cartel. That was a Homeland Security investigations case, which was started at the border, which was pretty cool. So we work a lot of those cases, even here in Utah. In fact, our guys were out last night arresting a bunch of drug dealer gang members, which was pretty cool. And we also arrested a child pornographer last night, and we also arrested 2 human traffickers this morning. So yeah. Pretty cool. Pretty cool. Spirit hands. I appreciate that. But the stuff, just in a nutshell, what we investigate: drugs, human trafficking, human smuggling, child exploitation, cyber crimes, anything you can think of from the dark web. But that's weapons trafficking, that's drugs, that's financial crimes. We deal with that. We deal with illegal import and export cases, which are known as counterproliferation cases, and those are basically cases that bad actors, enemies of the United States, want to get a hold of our military technology most of the time, or sensitive technologies, as something as pretty minor as Glock triggers for pistols, which are illegal to export, to high-tech F-16 parts.
Oh, wow.
And they use intermediaries. I mean, we arrested a North Korean spy a couple of years ago.
Like F-16 is the fighter jet?
As the fighter jet.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
they'll get parts of that. One guy was trying to sell an F-16 cockpit on eBay one time.
What?
Dead serious. Yeah, dead serious. And it's a federal offense because he was trying to get it out of the country. and that's where we get involved because you have to have certain licenses and permission from the State Department and things like that. And so we do a lot of undercover work related to those kinds of things, which is pretty cool. I can't get into the operational side of that, obviously, but guys are traveling all over the world doing undercover work in some pretty cool places with some pretty cool cases. We arrested a Russian guy a couple of years ago who was trying to export a bunch of snipers rifles that was going to the Russian military.
So this stuff really happens in real life. It's not just the movies.
This is all real. This is all real life stuff. Yeah, I mean, the stuff we get into is really, really cool, and I'm ultimately responsible for all that stuff in Utah. I don't directly investigate anymore. I've promoted up too high to the second level, but I'm involved in a lot of the operational decision making when it comes to hey, who's doing what, that kind of thing. I get to go out and kick indoors and things like that if I feel like it. I think we spoke about that a couple of weeks ago.
Weren't you just down here?
I was just down here conducting some business, which was interesting. And
here being Lehigh, Utah, for those who are not in Utah.
Which again, we like to consider the Modesto of Utah. I think I spoke of that.
He may have mentioned that, but
but yeah, I mean, it's funny. People think of Homeland Security. We obviously are part of the terrorism world as well. We've got people assigned to the JTTF or the Joint Terrorism Task Force the FBI runs. All that stuff happens in Utah. People don't think that it does, but it does. I mean, we have cartel activity here. We've got violent gang activity here. Tons of, unfortunately, child pornography and child exploitation here in Utah. We've got a lot of people that are doing some really, really bad stuff and some wild stuff. We get involved in wildlife trafficking cases. A guy that was importing, I'm not making this up, guy that was importing these very, very expensive snakes from Brazil, and they were sneaking them in like in their pants and crazy stuff like that. Dead serious. Yeah. Birds, and
that puts a whole new definition to snake in your pants.
Totally, especially when it's a boa constrictor. You know what I'm saying?
Or snake on a plane.
100%.
You know, I mean the move. Wow.
Oh yeah, you're taking a real risk sticking a boa constrictor in your pants.
Put them to sleep, like inject them with some sort of.
Yeah, they dope them up.
Golly
Believe it or
sakes.
not, they dope them up. They do the same thing with these exotic birds. Like we got a guy at LAX one time who had these, like, he was coming from like Thailand or something, and he had like 16 birds taped to his legs, and they had like given him Ambien or something. And dead serious. I mean, the stuff that people think of that we get involved in, like the stories go on and on and on, and it's all here. I mean, fossil dinosaur bone cases and all sorts of crazy stuff we get involved in. So it's a pretty cool job. It really is. I mean, you see a lot of terrible things, but then you see things that make you laugh. I'm sure your dad told you some pretty funny stories about the stuff he ran into.
Yeah.
But yeah, so kind of circling back to the beginning of your question, yeah, I'm operationally responsible for everything that goes on here. So when guys are out arresting people, I got to sign off on the operational plans. I got to make sure they got the manpower. And I also do the mundane stuff, a lot of reports, time cards, things like that. I mean, you're a boss, you know how that goes. And
making sure people are clocking in, they're not
100%.
Yeah.
All that stuff, all the disciplinary stuff. I have to deal with that stuff too. So it's a cool job. I do miss getting out there and running and gunning with the guys on occasion, and putting handcuffs on people. But, I like where I'm at now. It's given me a lot more flexibility to do things like this, where I can come in and, talk to you and get to the gym, with you guys.
Well, I mean, the road is the road, and honestly, is at the end of it is to retire with your wife and get 100%. Your pension. And I think right now you're in the best case scenario for that, right? Like 100%. It's kind of smooth sailing for the next maybe 10, 15 more years, and then you get your pension.
So that's crazy. So I'm actually eligible to retire when I'm 50. So
really?
I'll have just under 20 something years, 23 years when I retire. And when I'm eligible to retire, and I can walk away and pull my full pension and then go do something else. And that's
Are you
the
thinking
plan.
about that, or are you thinking that you want to stay a little longer because you like the job and you're going to miss it and you won't be able to do that anymore?
So I'm leaning pretty heavy about walking away.
Wow.
And doing something else. I mean, we talked earlier. I've got 6 kids. I got a 5-year-old at home. So even with the pension, it doesn't cover all the expenses that I'm going to need. So I'm definitely going to continue to work because I'll go crazy if I don't. But
I think you'd make a pretty good boxing coach.
you think so?
I think you'd make an excellent boxing coach.
I would, not going to lie, I would love to be a boxing coach. And to be honest with you, and you've seen me on a couple of days where I walk in, he's like, ooh, he's in a bad mood. And I was like, man, is it really written on my face like that? And it really is. But I'm not going to lie, man, after the workouts, I feel so much better. I do. It is like this cathartic experience for me every single time, especially when I'm like, man, I'm pissed off, somebody did something that made me mad, or, we did something stupid. I'm going to go box. In fact, I remember texting you one time and I was like, hey, I'm going to try to make it to the 5 o'clock class or whatever. And you're like, you're not going to try to make it. You're going to make it. And I was like, fine.
Don't confuse effort with success.
Exactly. And I show up and I'm like, oh, I don't want to tell him this, but he was right. I feel so much better now that I'm here and doing this. And that's what's been so great about, joining Legends and doing this stuff. But yeah, I'm thinking very seriously about retiring and then getting another job, maybe in the same realm, maybe in law enforcement. I got a lot of contacts around here, so I could potentially stay in the law enforcement environment. But to be perfectly honest with you, I'd like to do something maybe a little bit different. We work with a lot of non-governmental organizations related to a lot of our cases that help support our human trafficking investigations and our child exploitation investigations. And I have a lot of experience in that kind of stuff. And so there's opportunities for me to be still around law enforcement, which I absolutely love the environment. Even as tricky as it's gotten over the last couple of years, it's still a great place to be and a great career to get into, especially on the federal side, because that's really all I know. But so I'd like to stay within the realm, maybe not, catch bad guys as much as, train people, get the word out, kind of push that kind of thing, and maybe continue to do some boxing or some coaching or something like that. I mean,
Well, I know a guy. If you're thinking about boxing,
coaching, okay. Well, you give me his number before we leave today.
I got you.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
I got you.
I appreciate that.
I won't put it on air for everybody.
Yeah, you don't hurt anyone's feelings, but yeah, no, that's kind of the plan. When you do that job, I'm sure your dad probably had the same feeling. Well, once you're ready to kind of get out of the environment, you're ready. Right.
Yeah, he was ready.
Yeah. And
he got out, I think, at the right time, too.
Did he? How long did he?
He retired, I think, just right around there. I think it was 50, 55.
Okay.
Maybe a little younger, but he retired from BART PD, which for those who aren't familiar with the Bay Area, it's their rapid transit system. And so he would always explain it as we are to the BART station as the highway patrol is to the highway. Right. And so that actually kind of gave him a little bit more jurisdiction because the BART train runs throughout the entire Bay Area, and so he could basically drive anywhere. Right. But he was ready to go. It was, if memory serves, like early 2000s, like early 2000s, 2002, 2005, something like that, when he retired. And then they moved out here to Utah, and that's kind of how I found myself back here in 2008. Yeah, he was kind of chomping at the bit. I remember when I hit 18, it's like most kids move out of their parents' house, but no, my parents moved out of the house I was living in. So it was like they moved to the Bay Area and they're like, we're renting an apartment, we're selling our house, we're getting ready to retire. They moved to a little town called Dublin, just right in the Bay Area. And they would drive to the BART station, hop on the BART and go to work every day until they retired. And then right before they retired, and the house was being finished here in Alpine, Utah, they just moved back, and I think they lived with my sister for a few weeks, and then here they were, and now they're enjoying their retirement. And I think they're actually busier now than they've ever been in their entire life being retired with, doctor's visits and everything like that. But I love my parents to death. Just played 18 holes with them yesterday.
Oh, very good. Very good.
So we have a standing golf. So that's the one thing I'm still trying to get you into. Hang up the road bike. And
I mean, we'll definitely have to do it. I just don't want to slow you down. I'm such a hacker, man. I'm just not good at that sport. But I haven't dedicated to it.
I taught you how to be a good boxer.
Well, I mean, you've definitely been incredibly helpful. So if you can teach me to golf and my wife's good with it, I'll get out there with you. I'll get out there with you. Just don't make me feel too terrible when I hook and slice every single time I swing. So.
Never, never, never. That was actually one of the other things that my buddy Nico said was that I have a very good way of making you feel really good about sucking at stuff. And
that is true.
Yeah,
that is true. I have, and that again, that's another thing. One of the things I appreciate about you and the team. Again, just speaking for Bountiful, I was down here for the sparring clinic a couple of weeks ago, and I met some of the instructors or the coaches, and it seems like the environment is the same everywhere. I went to a couple of classes down in St. George a couple of months ago, and same environment, same positivity, and you guys make us feel really good, even when we're doing bad. Especially when I showed up and my stance was wrong, still is sometimes. The punches were different. Everything was just so different. You guys just stuck with me, and it was great. It's been a phenomenal experience. I just love it.
Well, I love that. Thanks, man. I appreciate you saying that.
Absolutely, man.
If there's anybody watching or listening to this episode and they were curious, how would they go about becoming a part of Homeland Security, or what's the first kinds of steps that they need to make?
So that's a great question. The first thing is you got to find out exactly who we are and what we do. Homeland Security is a humongous entity. The Homeland Security investigation side, the special agent side, which is what I'm a part of, is just a small piece of DHS as a whole. And so the first thing you want to do is figure out exactly like what you want to do within that realm, whether it be law enforcement or intelligence or whatever, because there's a lot of confusion about who does what. Even with us, there's there's a lot of cross-traffic stuff. We run into the FBI with a lot of stuff, the Drug Enforcement Administration, the ATF. So you really got to figure out, okay, what do I want to do? What am I interested in? What am I willing to do? So, you can find all that stuff out online. My first recommendation would be get educated, get online and look us up, see who we are. You can go in and Google Homeland Security Investigation, Special Agent positions, and they'll give you it'll pull up a bunch of different options for people. And then you're going to go on what's called USA Jobs, which is the overall government website for any sort of position within the government. That includes the clandestine services like the CIA, the intelligence services like the NSA, and or law enforcement as well. That includes us, the FBI. We all post job openings on there. And there's a million different types of openings, but if you want to do what I do, as a special agent, you want to look for the criminal investigator position, and it'll give you the background, which my recommendation for people coming in now would be, if you can get a degree, great. That's a great way to kind of give you a leg up, but it's not necessary. But you will have to have other types of experiences if you don't have the degree, whether it be local law enforcement, state law enforcement, military is something we always look at. But also, if you've got a specialized skill, that's something we're always looking for, whether it be computers. Our world is wrapped in computers, right? And I'm not just talking on the law enforcement community, but just our world in general, right? We are attached to our phones, our laptops, whatever. And unfortunately, the criminality has migrated to that so much. And so we have to be up to speed on that, because if we don't know what virtual currency is, Bitcoin, that kind of stuff, how can we possibly put people in jail for using it to buy M16s or rocket propelled grenades, things like that, which we run into all the time, right? Wow. So accounting degrees are great, law degrees are great, or even just the skill sets, right? A lot of people I know are self-taught on a lot of these things. Those are the kind of people we're looking for. We're looking for creative thinkers. We're looking for people that, have interesting skill sets, not just knuckle draggers who can kick in a door and stick a gun in somebody's face, right? We're not looking for that. We're looking for smart people that can be creative in what they do and, be ethical, right? Because there's a big ethical component, especially right now. We're under the microscope from the public, and rightfully so in certain, aspects. But we want to bring in people that are honest, integral, and will do the right thing when the wrong thing and the easy thing presents itself, right? That would be my advice to, look into it, see if you're qualified. If you want to do it, get qualified, right? You can become a special agent up until you're 37 years old. You just missed it. Just missed it.
Like 6 years.
I know. Darn it. Dang it. A time machine. But yeah, so there is a time frame that you have to, put your name in for it. And then there's a very rigorous training you got to go through. There are our academy down in Georgia you got to get through, which isn't super hard, but it's not super easy either. And then you got to get out there and be able to be willing to work the weird hours, to get involved in stuff that can frankly be horrible, right? And be prepared for that. And we try to prepare our agent trainees and the folks that are going through the process. We're like, hey, look, this is the stuff you're going to see. You might see a dead body. You might have to use force. You might have to use your firearm. You might see terrible things online that you are never going to get out of your head. Right?
Sounds like growing up in a Modesto.
That's what I'm saying. It's like move to Modesto and then see if you want to be a federal agent, right? I mean, that seems like a very good transition, but it's true, right? Because it's not for everybody. We've had guys that have gone through the process. We've hired, we brought on, and within the first couple of months, they're like, "This just isn't for me. I can't keep up with the tempo of it, or I saw something that I can't sleep anymore." Right? And I'm not saying that happens. That's a very, very
like rare thing.
It's a rare thing, but it happens, right? It does happen, and you have to deal with, the impact that it has on your family life. Sometimes the unexpected travel, the things like that. But it's a great career. I mean, I would recommend it to anybody who wants to get into it. Like I still pinch myself sometimes. I remember the first time it really dawned on me how cool of a career field I was in. And then this is going back to my Secret Service days. I remember I was at the United Nations General Assembly. This was in 2004, I think. And I was just newbie. I mean, I'd been on the job for maybe a year and a half or something like that. And I'm standing there and I'm standing in front of a door. That was a lot of what the Secret Service does is you stand in front of doors and make sure people don't go through it. Like it's not that high speed, low drag like some people think, right? But I was standing there and I was what they were called holding a room, basically. Like they had already swept for the bombs and all that stuff and nobody was in there. And I was holding the room. It was a bilateral meeting. And I wasn't sure who the bilateral meeting was going to be with. And bilateral means, they have these heads of state that come together and they meet. And I look up and I'm like, there's the President of the United States walking right at me. That's pretty cool. Right behind him was Vladimir Putin when we were still sort of friends with them. So there's Vladimir Putin, the Russian president. And right behind him was Benjamin Netanyahu, the prime minister of Israel. And I'm like, this is the coolest thing I've ever seen or done in my life.
That's pretty dope.
I mean, that is pretty freaking cool.
Yeah.
And I'm just this guy, but they trust me enough to be around these people with a firearm and all this training and stuff. And I was like, holy cow, I can't imagine doing anything else. And as my career has progressed and as I switched agencies, I still feel the same way. Like it's just a really, really great way to spend your professional time, in my opinion, right? You deal with a lot of BS and the public hating you and all that stuff occasionally because it's like a roller coaster. But when you look back, and I hope your dad feels the same way, is like I really felt like I made a difference in a very, very small way in people's lives and, the community of Utah and the Los Angeles area when I was down there before. And just a great thing, you know what I mean? But you have to have those outlets too, right? Which is why when I talk to people, I'm like, hey, tried martial arts, tried boxing, like come over to Legends. I'm trying to get my brothers-in-law to come. And like, I don't want to get hit in the face, right? You're not going to get hit in the face. Unless you want to get hit in the face, then you'll get hit in the face, right?
Well, I appreciate it. Well, I mean, I appreciate you being here very much. For people in law enforcement, and the majority that I've run across that have your attitude, have your ethics, morals, everything that you put forth, and the pride that you have for your job, you are putting your life out there every single day. You're protecting and serving us as a community. So again, I appreciate your service. I appreciate you and for everything that you do. I appreciate the friendship that we are developing. It's great. And your love and loyalty for Legends. But most importantly, I appreciate you being here today. Thanks a lot,
Glad to be here.
man.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.